Pack fast, loser. Dad's finally done carrying you, my brother sneered, tossing his car keys onto the counter like he owned the place. His words stung, but not as much as Dad's voice thundering minutes earlier. You have 24 hours to get your stuff out. That house is your brother's now. Hi everyone. My name is Lena Carter, I'm 27. I never thought I'd be telling this story, not here, not like this. You know that sharp silence when the world tilts against you? That's where I stood. In the house I grew up in, suddenly a stranger. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just pressed my lips together and nodded. Because when betrayal arrives dressed as family, words are worthless. That night I sat on the floor of my half-empty bedroom, staring at the boxes around me. My hands trembled over old photos. Dad's smile on my graduation day, Mom braiding my hair before prom, my brother pretending to care. Each memory burned now poisoned. My chest felt like a locked drawer, stuffed with grief and rage that had no place to breathe. I kept moving silently, folding clothes, stacking books, sliding documents into files. Each tape-sealed box was a heartbeat of surrender. But beneath that silence, something else was pulsing. Not defeat, not despair. A rhythm. A plan. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters. Inside, I could hear my brother laughing in the living room, already drunk on his new power. His voice rose and fell like a bad song. Finally mine. About time Dad saw who deserves it. Deserve. That word twisted in my gut. I had built half of this house with sweat. Repainting walls, fixing the leaky roof, covering bills when Dad fell short. But none of that mattered now. They saw me as disposable. I tied the last box, stood up and looked in the mirror. My reflection didn't flinch. My silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. 2 days later, when my brother swung open that front door with swagger in his step, he thought he was walking into his prize. But I had left him something waiting, something carefully placed, quiet and devastating. And when he saw it, his face drained of color. For the first time in his life, my brother wished he had never stepped inside. If this ever happened to you, say, same in the comments. He froze in the doorway, his smirk collapsing into confusion. The air inside was still but heavy, like the house itself was holding its breath. On the kitchen table sat a neat stack of envelopes, each labeled in my careful handwriting. His name was on the top one. Behind it, more, all addressed to people who mattered more than him. Dad, the bank, even the county clerk. Lena, his voice cracked, the bravado thinning. I wasn't there to answer. But my words were. Inside his envelope he found copies of receipts. Every mortgage payment I had covered, every utility bill I had paid, every repair estimate I had signed. Years of proof, a paper trail screaming the truth they ignored. At the bottom, a note in black ink. Ownership isn't about blood. It's about who bled for this house. He tossed the papers aside, but they slid across the table like blades. One fell open. A record of the $61,200 I had quietly poured into keeping this home alive while Dad and he looked the other way. He stormed into the living room, fists clenched, eyes darting. But the walls betrayed him too. Where family photos once hung, I had left only the empty frames. Inside the frames, tucked neatly, were duplicates of the same receipts. No corner of that house was untouched by the truth. I imagined his face, veins tight, jaw grinding. Because the evidence was undeniable. For the first time he couldn't erase me with a joke or overshadow me with Dad's approval. The house itself whispered my name now. He called Dad, I knew he would. I pictured the phone vibrating in Dad's pocket, his impatient sigh, the moment his eyes skimmed the scans I had sent directly to his email. Silence would stretch on the other end of the line, sharp as glass. I wasn't there when the storm began, but I didn't need to be. I had already planted the seeds. And as my brother ripped through room after room, he realized he hadn't inherited a prize. He had inherited a reckoning. In that silence between his curses, a new truth was being born. The girl they pushed out was no longer begging for her place. He was claiming it. The phone call didn't go how my brother expected. I know because Dad's voice carried even down the block where I sat in my car, engine off, watching through the cracked window. What the hell is all this? Dad's shout was sharp, panicked, but not at me this time. At him. My brother stammered, waving papers in the air, pacing like a trapped animal. She planted this stuff, Dad. She forged it. But Dad wasn't buying it. I'd been meticulous. Dates aligned. Signatures were clean. Bank stamps shone clear in the copies. Every receipt carried weight, the kind no denial could crush. I closed my eyes and listened, the sound drifting through the night. It was strange, surreal. For years, Dad's voice had been the gavel that sentenced me, the hammer that kept me small. But now it trembled. "She paid this," he muttered, softer this time. The words cracked me open inside. Not because they healed anything. No, the scars ran too deep. But because they proved what I always knew. They had seen and chosen to look away. My brother raged louder, his words breaking. "So what? She's still out. You gave me this house." Silence. Then the dull thud of Dad's fist hitting the table. Maybe I spoke too soon. That was my cue. I stepped out of the car, the night air biting but clean. My shoes crunched against gravel, each step deliberate. The porch light glowed, casting my brother's shadow against the blinds. When I knocked, the sound cut through their argument. Two heads whipped toward the door. My brother's face appeared first, red with fury. "You think you're clever," he started, yanking the door open. But his words caught. Dad was behind him, holding one of my receipts with shaking hands, eyes flicking between the page and me. I didn't say a word. Not yet. I just let the silence fill the space between us, a silence heavier than any scream. For the first time they both looked at me, not as background, not as burden, but as the storm they never saw coming. And storms don't ask permission. They arrive. The doorway felt like a stage, and for once I wasn't cast as the quiet extra. Dad's eyes clung to the papers in his hand, then lifted to me. My brother, on the other hand, leaned forward, spit on his lip, his rage a mask for fear. "You don't belong here," he barked, pointing at me like a child staking claim on a toy. Dad already gave it to me. I stepped over the threshold, slow, deliberate. The floor creaked under my weight, and I swear the whole house sighed in relief, as if it had been waiting for me to return. "Belonging isn't given," I said, my voice calm but sharp. "It's proven. And I already proved it. Every nail, every bill, every dollar you never touched. My fingerprints are all over this place." Dad didn't interrupt. His silence was louder than my brother's fury. I pulled another envelope from my coat and laid it on the table. "This one isn't for you," I said, meeting my brother's eyes. "It's from the county records office. Title history, Texas, and a little note from a lawyer." He snatched it up, skimmed, then threw it back down. His laugh cracked like glass. "So what? You think paperwork makes you stronger than family?" My jaw tightened. "No. But it makes me harder to erase." For years I had been erased. Birthdays overshadowed, victories ignored, sacrifices swallowed. Tonight I was done being invisible. Dad rubbed his temples, muttering under his breath, "I should have known, all those times she—" He cut himself off, guilt lining his face. It was the first time I'd ever seen it there. My brother lunged, slamming his fist on the table, shaking the empty frames I'd left behind. "This is still mine," he roared, his voice bouncing off the walls. But the house didn't echo him back. It stood quiet, siding with the truth nailed into its bones. I didn't flinch. I just leaned closer and whispered, steady as stone, "Careful, brother. Some inheritances come with ghosts." And in that moment I saw it, a flicker of fear crossing his eyes. Not of me, but of everything I had uncovered. Because ghosts don't leave. They haunt. And I was just getting started. The night deepened, but no one moved. Dad sat hunched in his chair, papers scattered at his feet like fallen verdicts. My brother paced the living room, his sneakers dragging, his voice cracking as he muttered to himself. "You think you're smarter than me? You think you can trap me with receipts?" He laughed bitterly, but his eyes betrayed him, darting, restless, searching for cracks in my armor. I stayed standing. My silence was my shield. The house smelled of dust and old wood, but beneath it was something sharper, the scent of change, of truth finally crawling into the open. I placed one more folder on the coffee table. The label read, "Joint bank account statements." My brother froze, his hand twitching toward it, then stopping. You didn't." I tilted my head. "Every time Dad wired you money for the house, it went to car payments, vacations, bottles of whiskey. You never touched the roof, the plumbing, the cracked foundation." "I did." Dad's head snapped up, his face pale. He grabbed the folder, flipped through pages lined with withdrawals, luxury purchases, bars and resorts. "You lied to me," Dad whispered, his voice low and dangerous. "All those years. My brother's skin flushed, words tumbling out in broken excuses. She's twisting it. She set me up. But his voice was thinner now. Even he could hear it. I stepped closer, my boots clicking against the floor. You wanted the house because you thought it was free. Easy. But nothing here was ever free. I paid for it with money and years you'll never get back. He glared at me, eyes glassy. You're not taking this from me. I leaned in, my voice steady as steel. I'm not taking anything. I'm just showing Dad who really lost it. The words landed like a stone dropped into water, rippling through the room. Dad's breathing slowed, heavy, each inhale sounding like regret. And for the first time my brother looked smaller than me. Not in size. In truth. The silence in that room stretched so thin it could have snapped. Dad's hands shook as he gripped the bank statements, the lines on his forehead carved deeper with every page he turned. My brother stood behind him, jaw clenched, arms crossed, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine. I finally spoke, my words quiet but sharp. You thought I'd walk away quietly. You thought wrong. My brother scoffed, trying to muster that same arrogance. Dad, don't listen to her. She's just jealous. She's always been jealous. Dad cut him off with a slam of his fist on the table. Enough. His voice boomed, rattling the empty frames I'd left on the walls. My brother flinched. I didn't. Dad turned to me, his expression heavy, almost broken. Why didn't you tell me? I swallowed, forcing my voice steady. Because you wouldn't have listened. You never did. You only heard him. The truth landed hard. Dad's eyes flickered, guilt pooling in them like a shadow he couldn't outrun. My brother stepped forward, desperate now. It's still mine. You said it. You gave it to me. That can't just change. I reached into my bag, pulled out one last envelope and slid it across the table. It already did. Dad opened it slowly. Inside was the letter from my lawyer. A formal notice filed with the county, backed by every receipt, every statement, every time-stamped transaction proving my financial claim to the property. It wasn't bluster. It was binding. My brother's face drained of color. You wouldn't dare. I leaned closer, locking eyes with him. I already did. The room fell into a heavy hush. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator filled the space. For years my brother's voice had drowned me out. Dad's judgment had crushed me into silence. Now their silence was my weapon. I stood tall, the house around me no longer a prison. It was mine, built by my sacrifices, anchored by my proof. And in that moment I realized something. Revenge didn't need to be loud. Sometimes, it was as quiet as paper sliding across a table. My brother's hands shook as he grabbed the letter back from Dad, scanning the lines like he could will them to disappear. His lips moved without sound at first, then the words broke free. This doesn't matter. He promised me. You can't undo that. I stepped closer, my voice low, controlled. A promise built on lies isn't a promise. It's a trap. And you walked right into it. Dad said nothing. He just stared at the letter, his shoulders slumped under the weight of every choice that had brought us here. His authority, his favoritism, his blindness. It all cracked in that silence. My brother's face twisted red. You don't get it, Lena. You've always been nothing. A shadow. You think paperwork makes you somebody? You'll never. I cut him off with the calmest words I had ever spoken. Look around you. He did. The walls bare of family photos. The receipts tucked into frames. The folders spread across the table. Every corner of the house now whispered my name. This place isn't your trophy, I continued. It's proof. Proof of what I carried when no one else would. Dad finally spoke, his voice hoarse. She's right. The words hung in the air, heavy, final. My brother's mouth fell open, his last line of defense crumbling. You'd choose her, he spat. After everything? After me. Dad's gaze didn't waver. No. I'm choosing the truth. My brother staggered back like the ground had given way under him. His anger had nowhere left to land. And for once he was the one standing in silence. I took a deep breath. The revenge wasn't in breaking him. It was in standing tall, unshaken while he finally saw me for who I was. And tomorrow the world would see it too. Morning light poured through the windows, cutting across the table where the final letter still lay. I stood with my coat draped over my arm, ready to leave the house not in defeat, but in ownership. Dad hadn't said much after his admission, but he didn't need to. The way he avoided my eyes, the way his shoulders caved. It was the first time he carried the weight I had carried all my life. My brother sat slumped on the couch, his defiance drained. He stared at the papers, knowing every number, every date, every detail was a nail sealing the truth. For once he had no weapon left but silence. I turned toward the door, pausing long enough to let my words settle like ash. I'm not here to take your pride or your place. I'm here to take back what's mine, the respect you thought I'd never claim. He didn't look up. Maybe he couldn't. Outside the air felt sharper, freer. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from my lawyer. Filed and confirmed. It's official. The house behind me wasn't just a house anymore. It was a battlefield I had finally won, not with rage, not with shouting, but with patience and proof. Years of silence had finally spoken louder than their voices. I walked to my car, the gravel crunching under my shoes like a drumbeat. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a guest in my own life. I felt unshaken, undeniable. Justice hadn't come in fireworks or dramatic endings. It came in stillness. In truth that refused to bend. In the quiet power of knowing I didn't need their approval anymore. I started the engine, looked at the house one last time and whispered to myself, they tried to erase me. But I became permanent. As I drove away, the weight lifted. My story wasn't about losing a family or winning a house. It was about reclaiming myself, piece by piece, until there was nothing left they could take. And with that, it was over.